Hi, everyone. I'm Eddy Salas, and welcome back to The Price Point. We've highlighted this topic relatively recently in one of our previous episodes of The Price Point. But today, I want to delve into tariffs a little bit more. I want to understand some of the cost pressures that we're actually seeing, but also delve into the complexities that are actually associated with tariffs and overall calculations and what we're actually seeing in the respective market. So get ready. Let's go ahead and dive into understanding tariffs just a little bit more than what the headlines are telling us. As we take a step back, we understand that tariffs really come with cost pressures, right? Sometimes you may have a sudden increase in landed cost. And especially if you're a DSD or drop ship and that's really heavily into your business, you're going to feel that impact right away. Margin compression is going to occur at the SKU level pretty significantly. So, it really forces margin protection tactics, whether it be on price, whether it be on packaging, to be able to maintain so that you don't necessarily lose out at the end of the day. So these type of forces, these tariffs and others, these emerging forces are reshaping pricing, content, and digital visibility at the end of the day. But the problem with tariffs today, and we've talked about this, it's driving uncertainty, right? Are we going to have these tariffs? Yes or no? If we are, what's the rate that it's actually going to be? Right? So just as bad as the landed tariff cost is this uncertainty. So do you move right now or do you hold? Do you wait to see what competition does? Right? So this uncertainty kind of gives us a little gray area at the end of the day. So these shifting trade policies are going to potentially spike costs. The margins at SKU level become compromised. Brands may now start considering shrinkflation. They may start, reducing the size of their overall packaging. And there's a lot of unpredictability in the overall marketplace. And speaking of that unpredictability, tariffs are very complicated and convoluted in terms of how you actually go about calculating it. So if we take a step back and understand the tariff process, it's really kind of a threefold process, if you will, right? Tariffs are governed by what's known as a HS code, which is a harmonized system code. And what that really represents is a grouping of products. And this can get some really granular aspect of it. That's the beginning point of governing what items are going to be covered by that tariff. So that HS code represents a group of products. And again, because of how granular these HS codes are, it really can push a product where you think from one HS code to a different one just based upon some little designation associated with it. Now, that HS code is also associated with a country of origin. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more even more complicated. Is that particular country part of the World Trade Organization, WTO, or are they part of some type of specialized rates that the U.S. actually has? USMCA is a perfect example of that, right? The U.S. Mexico Canada initiative that's out there. So let's take a look at this particular example. Hass avocados. Hass avocados are governed by the HS code 8044001, right? And that's really all about fresh and dried avocados. Now, the import tax, the import duty is really going to be dependent upon where the US is actually sourcing that respective item. So if they source it from Peru, for example, Peru is part of the WTO, it's going to be a 10% tariff. So all the WTO countries are going to get taxed at that 10%. However, if those avocados come from Mexico, because of the trade agreement that's out there, there's no tariff. That's why sourcing becomes an incredible important aspect of a retailer and a brand, because it's going to be governed by this respective aspect of it. All right. So that's the entire process. The product is associated with an HS code, and that HS code is essentially going to be driving what your respective country of origin is. If you get the wrong origin, you get the wrong rule, you're really trying to calculate and project the wrong margin, right? That's really where the complication aspect of it comes into play. Now, what are we seeing out there in retail? Well, we're seeing prices starting to accelerate, right? In the following graphic, you see China almost up 14%, or products that we procure from China almost up 14%. Makes sense because there's a lot of tariffs being imposed on China today. Mexico is up 11%. It's interesting. US sourced products are also up 10%. Now, why is that, right? Why do we have that if tariffs are all about imports that are actually coming in? Well, I mean, the reality is that, it really all depends on kind of the type of product that we actually have out there. So if I think about something like guacamole may be made in the US, but avocados may be coming from Mexico. The lime juice may be coming from Central America. Seasoning, they could be coming from India or China. Packaging may come from Asia. All these different dynamics are essentially playing into what that tariff is. So even though something may be considered made in the USA, components of those particular items may be sourced from elsewhere, which are then imposed from a tariff aspect of it. That's why you start seeing kind of the US rates also kind of going up. Now, the rates also aren't necessarily hitting all at the same time. If I look at beauty, beauty, if we look back in time, has been fairly constant. There really hasn't been much inflation associated with it, especially if we looked at products sourced from China, and then of course the USA aspect of it. But if you take a look at what happened earlier this year, we really went from 0 to 1% inflation to now the US having about 10% inflation and China imported products about 12.5%. So that really plays into the dynamics that we're actually seeing in the overall marketplace. So outside of price, what are brands doing in order to help mitigate some of that impact? This is where the hidden cost comes into play that customers may notice. It's shrinkflation. I may have the same shelf price, I may have less product. That potentially erodes customer trusts, right? Yes, it may actually protect margin at the end of the day, but does it become a long-term detriment in terms of your customers and how they view the brand? And it's occurring a lot within the respective marketplace today. The following graphic, you actually see, this is actually pulled within the last month. There's a lot of different items that are going through shrinkflation. Some on average about 5 or 6% reduction. You do see it as high as 15%, 25%. And what's even worse is that on some of these products, not only are we seeing the packaging shrink a little bit, the prices are going up. So it's really kind of a double whammy in terms of what customers are actually seeing. And this really is leading to kind of that erosion in trust. So when we think about tariffs at the end of the day, the costs are really shaping strategies, whether it's pricing strategy or whether it's actually from a packaging strategy that are out there, right? We are seeing retail price increases across a number of categories that are out there. We're also seeing promotion shifts, right? There are fewer discounts, especially in segments that are heavily tariffed, right? Timing is now becoming critical. Are you an early mover or are you a lagger? Is your competitor really have a good warehousing system that they can absorb that cost before they actually got to be able to move on price? Knowing your competition is really going to become more and more of a strategic advantage at the end of the day. So when we take a look at tariffs, there's a lot of complexities. There's a lot of aspects of it. Understand that it's reshaping the industry today. Whether we talk about strategies, whether we talk about the actual pricing that customers are seeing, whether we're talking about the actual packaging that's out there. So hopefully this kind of gave you a little bit of a little more of a deep dive understanding of how tariffs are calculated and some of the impacts that we're actually seeing at the end of the day. Looking forward to talking more with y'all during the next episode of The Price Point. Again, appreciate y'all going on this journey with me. Hope y'all have a good one.